Good day. Today's lecture is devoted to lectures as the main form of organization of educational activities at the university. This topic is especially important because despite the development of digital technologies and interactive formats, the lecture continues to occupy a central place in higher education. Its significance lies in the fact that it provides systematic orientation within a discipline, establishes the intellectual framework of study, and guides students toward more independent forms of academic work. Therefore, the lecture remains not merely a traditional form, but a pedagogically meaningful one. At the outset, the presentation formulates the core aim of the lecture with precision to organize the purposeful cognitive activity of students for mastering the program material of the discipline. This wording is methodologically significant. It reminds us that a lecture is not intended simply to deliver information. Rather, it is meant to direct and structure student thinking in such a way that the material is understood as part of a coherent academic system. Accordingly, the lecture must be evaluated not only by the amount of content presented, but also by the extent to which it stimulates meaningful cognitive work. This slide offers a definition of the lecture in the context of higher education. A lecture is described as both a teaching method and an organizational form, characterized by an oral, monological, logically structured, and scientifically grounded presentation of educational material. This definition is especially important because it combines formal and methodological dimensions within one concept. Furthermore, the lecture enables students to perceive the discipline as an integrated system of concepts, theories, and practical applications. In this regard, it usually precedes or accompanies seminars, laboratory work, and independent study. Consequently, the lecture should be understood not as an isolated academic event, but as the central orienting form within a wider educational structure. The slide then develops the educational purpose of the lecture in greater detail. Its principal aim is to organize purposeful cognitive activity and to help students master the program material. In addition, several specific objectives are identified: the formation of systematic knowledge, the development of scientific reasoning, the shaping of a professional worldview, the introduction of new scientific data, and the optimization of further seminars, projects, and research. Taken together, these objectives show that the lecture performs more than one pedagogical function. It introduces knowledge, disciplines thought, shapes academic values, and prepares students for more active and specialized forms of study. Therefore, the lecture remains foundational to university teaching precisely because it unites conceptual orientation with intellectual development. The lecture performs four major pedagogical functions: informational, motivational, orientational, and educational. The informational function presents a structured system of knowledge and theoretical foundations. The motivational function stimulates interest, intellectual curiosity, and professional orientation. The orientational function provides key concepts, methodological guidance, and directions for independent work. The educational function contributes to responsibility, critical thinking, and readiness for self-education. Thus, the lecture is pedagogically multifunctional. It not only informs, but also directs, motivates, and forms the learner intellectually and personally. The next slide turns to the classical structure of the lecture and begins with the introduction. As indicated here, a lecture includes three structural components: introduction, main part, and conclusion. The introduction is intended to attract students' attention and prepare them for the perception of new material. At this stage, the lecturer formulates the topic, explains its relevance, determines learning objectives, demonstrates its significance for future professional activity, and establishes intellectual contact with the audience. Therefore, the introduction performs not merely an opening function, but also an orienting and motivational one. This slide presents the remaining structural components of the classical lecture, the main part and the conclusion. The main part is devoted to the systematic presentation of content according to a logical plan. It includes theoretical concepts, scientific facts, explanations, examples, comparisons, and argumentation. Its quality depends on scientific accuracy, clarity of speech, and internal consistency. The conclusion, by contrast, summarizes the key ideas, formulates the main results, and connects the topic with future classes or professional practice. The teacher may also answer questions, recommend literature, or assign independent work. Thus, the lecture structure moves from orientation through conceptual development to synthesis and forward guidance. The presentation next classifies lectures according to their role within the curriculum. 5 main types are identified: introductory, basic, closing review, and special course lectures. The introductory lecture opens the discipline and familiarizes students with its goals, structure, and methods. The basic lecture systematically reveals the core content of the course. The closing lecture summarizes the material and emphasizes interdisciplinary connections. The review lecture is intended to prepare students for examinations. The special course lecture addresses narrow scientific problems or advanced research areas. This classification is pedagogically significant because it shows that lectures differ not only in content, but also in academic function. The slide then introduces another classification by the form of presentation. Here we encounter informational lectures, episodic lectures, and review lectures, while modern didactics also adds such forms as the problem lecture and the lecture visualization. Informational lectures remain the most common and are aimed at consistent transmission of theoretical material. Episodic lectures are one-time presentations on particular topics, often delivered by invited specialists. Review lectures synthesize large sections of material. The problem lecture, however, encourages students to search for solutions to contradictions, while the lecture visualization employs charts, diagrams, multimedia, and video in order to improve comprehension and retention. This slide presents several special lecture formats, lecture together, with pre-planned errors, press conference, discussion and conversation, with feedback, and with reference notes. Each of these introduces a specific form of student activation. 2 specialists may present differing viewpoints. Students may identify intentional inaccuracies. The lecture may be built around their questions, or continuous questioning may be used to monitor understanding. At the same time, the slide identifies the pedagogical conditions for effectiveness: teacher expertise, high-quality content, strong speech culture, active elements, and integration with seminars, practical classes, and independent study. Therefore, lecture effectiveness depends not only on form, but also on the professional quality of its implementation. The next slide addresses a contemporary debate. On the one hand, lectures are sometimes criticized as outdated because of online resources and self-learning platforms. On the other hand, the slide rightly argues that the modern lecture remains highly valuable when it becomes interactive, research-oriented, student-centered, and professionally relevant. What the lecture continues to offer is especially important: expert interpretation, scientific selection of content, methodological guidance, live academic communication, systematic knowledge acquisition. The conclusion of the lecture brings together its main ideas with appropriate clarity. The lecture provides systematic scientific knowledge, develops professional thinking, and supports holistic student development. At the same time, modern lecture practice incorporates interactive and problem-based approaches that strengthen motivation and critical thinking. Moreover, the variety of lecture types allows teachers to adapt the educational process to contemporary academic and professional requirements. Accordingly, the lecture remains an essential form of university education, not because it is traditional, but because it continues to adapt while preserving its core pedagogical value. Thank you for your attention. I hope this lecture has clarified the role of the lecture as the main form of organization of educational activities at the university, and has shown how its structure, functions, and contemporary formats contribute to effective higher education.